Yeah. So can you just start by introducing yourself, your name, and what you do?
So, my name is Abu Bara. I'm a lecturer in Sharia law.
And as you're a lecturer in Sharia law, where do you practice?
Obviously, I teach in various places in London, in the north of the UK, Birmingham, Derby, Stoke, Warsaw as well, Luton. I've also gone abroad to Denmark, Belgium, France, and taught in various other places as well.
Okay. And do you find that there's a lot of students that are coming to hear you teach and give lectures?
Yeah, there is, from a very wide, range of backgrounds, and there's a lot of people online, internationally, listen, even in Far Eastern countries, Indonesia, in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. There's nowadays with the internet technology, it's made it very easy for people all over the world to really share these kind of experiences.
And do you have any sort of any people from Europe, for example, Germany, France, even North Africa and the Middle East who are listening into your lectures?
Yeah, definitely. I get questions from them all the time. I get people phone me from those countries as well. Today there was a couple of people, or yesterday there came 2 people from Denmark came down to attend some lessons with us. So they attended my lesson yesterday. I did a special lesson for them afterwards as well. And so they're going to attend a few of my lectures and then go back.
Okay. Have you had anybody from Germany come at all?
I haven't personally had anybody from Germany come here. I know Muslims from Germany have come to the UK to study with some of my colleagues, but not necessarily in my classes specifically.
Okay. So what's your specialism?
Obviously, I studied deeply in issues of creed, of aqidah it's called, as well as the laws in various aspects of public life and private life. But in particular, issues to do with what makes Muslims leave the fold of Islam, apostasy, rules relating to this and the creation of that, and topics of khilafah, what is an Islamic State, Islamic ruling system, and those related topics.
Okay. And where did you gain your qualification? Where did you study?
So I studied with the Sheikh Omar Bakr Muhammad at the London School of Sharia. So I've been studying with him for many years now, for over 13 years now. But sadly he's in prison at the moment, so waiting for him to return to continue our studies with him.
Okay. Now, tell me, what is your understanding of Islam? What is Islam in your eyes?
Islam means the total submission to God exclusively, obeying His commands without any partners, according to His Sharia laws, His laws, and disassociating yourself from any polytheism and His people. So any form of associating partners with God and the people who do that, we must disassociate ourselves from them, and that is part of Islam.
Okay. If I were to ask you, give me a sort of drive-through or a dummy's guide to Islam, how would you actually do this?
Islam is a complete way of life. So every aspect of a person's life is governed by Islam. So whether it's the way they sleep and the way they wake up, to the way they groom and clean themselves, personal hygiene, to their family life at home, to their public life at work, to the economy, to the relationship with those in authority above them, the rulers, as well as how to rule, how to govern, how to establish an economy and society, how to establish judiciary and penal code, as well as foreign policy and international relationships. All of it is governed by Islamic laws, and so that's the core difference between a Muslim who lives according to Islam and non-Muslims.
In your eyes, what are the sort of key concepts of Islam?
The key main concept is that there's none worthy to be worshipped except Allah, and that includes to be followed and obeyed, and that His final messenger that came with His revelation to teach us what His laws are is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. So that is the core foundation of the entire religion of Islam.
Okay. And what are sort of the concepts that you would build onto that?
So you build upon that, that the Quran is the word of God, and the speech and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, they are called the Sunnah. These are the two legal sources for all legislation. So which means that we will not seek judgment from other than the laws of the Quran. So we will not go to UK courts or courts of man-made laws or democratic laws. We do not have parliaments to legislate laws, because the law has already been established in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet. So we will implement those laws and judge by those laws, and we'll never change them or introduce any new laws from ourselves.
Okay. Now, sort of moving on to sort of Muslim experiences in Europe. Now, of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of cases of discrimination. Islamophobia is on the rise in Europe, and of course, not to mention anti-Semitism and so on, racism in general, and hate crime in general is on the rise. What do you attribute all this to?
I think I attribute this to the clash of civilizations and clash of cultures. There is a strong revival taking place in the Muslim community. The Muslims are returning to the religion of Islam and looking to Islam for answers and solutions, and as an alternative system and way of life to what is being promoted in the West. And on the other side, you have the Western powers that are aggressively pushing their Western values and Western ideology and culture, and are feel very provoked or perhaps insecure about the fact that there is this revival among Muslims who are not accepting that way of life, and they're looking for an alternative and actually turning back to Islam as a way of life. Especially in new generations where people are practicing Islam more than their parents or their grandparents were. So that's caused a big change and a shift in the discrimination among sort of experiences of all people around the UK and Europe in general. People are no longer so concerned with just if you're black or if you're Irish or if you are Jewish, but it's become more focused on an attack upon Islam and Muslims and Islamic values.
What would you say are the sort of the key values of the West, and particularly talking about here Europe, are?
One of the key values obviously is the idea of democracy, the idea that men or people rather, they make the laws for themselves to govern society, and to separate from what they have church, separated from state. So the idea to mix religion and politics has become a taboo almost in this country, and there's become a dogma in relation to freedom and democracy and secularism that if you don't accept that, you're seen as extreme or radical or something wrong with you. So that is one of the key values in the West, which seem to be quite united upon. Then you have other values in relation to freedom, the freedom of religion, freedom of ownership, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. These type of values, on the face of it seems quite romantic, but in reality, it doesn't really exist, because what you actually have is there's only freedom to a certain extent. You will still have, for example, the hypocrisies and double standards. In France, they will ban the hijab, the niqab. They will ban the praying in the streets. This ultra-secularism, where they actually end up curbing, the freedoms of people to practice their religion. You will have in other countries they ban the minarets in Switzerland. The burqa has been banned in Belgium as well, and there's people being targeted because of that as well. Then you have the idea of freedom of speech. In essence, in reality, there's not really freedom at all. Again, it's only isolated to particular communities, whereas others will not really feel they have those kind of freedoms. In France, for example, they will have Charlie Hebdo insulting the Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, insulting Allah openly. But if anybody was to insult Charlie Hebdo, they will be arrested, and there's actually a man being arrested for mimicking the cover of a Charlie Hebdo magazine, replacing the picture of a Muslim man with a journalist from Charlie Hebdo, and he was arrested for it. There's singers who wrote a song, swearing or insulting France, and they were actually prosecuted for that in France. In France, you can't talk against the Holocaust. You can't question the Holocaust. That's illegal. On the other hand, they will claim they have freedom of speech. So it's not really freedom. There's never real freedom. There's always laws restricting speech, but it's just a matter of which speech you will restrict. So among the Western values, it seems to be more freedom, to promote democracy and the Western way of life, but no freedom to promote Islam or to defend Islam even. Myself personally, I went to prison for giving a speech, against the Danish cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad. The same freedom of speech that they used to defend the cartoons was not offered to me or anybody else who actually wanted to oppose it.
Okay. Well, what is your sort of understanding of the growth of right-wing movements in the UK, but also in Europe? I mean, I'm talking about the EDL, Britain First, talking about Marine Le Pen's group. I'm talking about the biggest movement, well, at least it appears to be in Europe, Padiga.
I think these groups rise as a result of the political elite and their own rhetoric and their propaganda. They are using the hysterical sort of anger and hatred towards Muslims, which they themselves have fanned and they've actually incited the people to have, in order to further their own agenda, further their own political aims, especially abroad, their own foreign policy. And obviously, the more that they continue to propagate this type of hatred and grudge against Islam Muslims, the more these common people, who don't have any real political power, they rise up with this racist attitude and this sort of racist approach, to buy into that. And I think that will continue to happen as long as there's this conflict between the West and Islam and sort of Muslims and those who are calling for Islam. As long as there's this clash, and that clash more is inflamed and more confrontational, the more people will actually go to extremes to take one side or the other.
In your view, what are the sort of key ideas that the groups like Britain First and Padiga and EDL stand for?
I think this group are very conflicted in their own ideas. They really don't know what they want. On the one hand, they will want for Muslims to leave the country. They'd rather not have anybody from immigrants, and I use this word loosely because they consider anybody who's Muslim really to be an immigrant, even if they were born here and bred up, even if they were convert to Islam, who were families lived here for hundreds of years. They will still consider them or treat them as some kind of foreigner because of their own religion and their own values. So on the one hand, they want Muslims to leave. That the party line is, if you don't like it here, why don't you leave and go somewhere else? On the other hand, they don't want them to leave. They don't want them to go to Islamic State or to Syria or to do to those. So they will complain if they do. If they do, they will claim that they are radical, they're terrorists, and all the while they were inciting them, but now they are called terrorists. So they don't really know what they want. All they know is that they're angry and they have a hatred, a deep hatred, and the nature of a grudge is that it doesn't make sense. When you have a grudge, you just can't swallow the person or those people, and you can never find any good in them. Any good that they do, you interpret it as evil, and that's really, I think, the sentiment among all of these groups.
Okay, so just sort of moving on to some of these experiences that Muslims had in Europe. Now we've sort of started the conversation about speaking about Muslim experiences, but I want to sort of flesh this idea about what type of experiences Muslims are having, which are termed as Islamophobic.
Yeah, well, there is many aspects to Islamophobia and sort of discrimination against Muslims. One is in the workplace, in the schools, in sort of the education sector. In the schools now, a lot of parents are afraid of the schools, the state schools, because they've introduced laws that will force their teachers to try to identify children as being radical, and you just can't do that. Children are children, and obviously they're very innocent, and they're naive. They will speak their mind, and it's almost as if people are worried that if the children speak their mind and say the wrong thing, that they could end up being labelled for the rest of their life as extremist or radical, or even be taken away from their parents. Even basic practicing of Islam has become a sign of radicalism. If you read the booklets and advice that they have, some of them they'll say, look, if they start to dress modestly, without even to elaborate more than that, to say if they start to dress modestly, then that is a sign of radicalism. You know, and obviously they mean by that if they start to wear the hijab or they start to wear the jilbab, the long, long cloak, or the niqab. But they're not even defining anything like that. You know, I've even read I've got it with me actually. There's an advice to parents and carers in Tower Hamlets, where they actually wrote down that signs of radicalism include good behaviour. That if the children start to behave better than they used to, and hang around people who are more better behaving than their previous friends, and they seem to be more concerned with their studies, even that's considered radicalism. So you know, it's really this hysteria or fear. The schools don't know what to do. They know what they're looking for, and so they find things where there's nothing there. So even from that early stage, there's this danger and this conflict. There's always a conflict between home and school, and the culture that they taught at school and what they have at home. And the teachers will try to impress upon the children that actually their parents don't know how the world works, that they're backwards, and what they're teaching them is not really right, and their way is better. This conflict between the idea of arranged marriages and the system in the West of love and dating and so on. So these conflicts will occur in somebody's mind from a very young age. Then at work, they will continue to have these problems. There are very few jobs out there in the UK, or even in Europe in general, that does not have some kind of haram or prohibited element to it. Whether you're an accountant, you have to write down interest, which is not allowed. If you are a shop, you'll find that the people will not buy from you unless you sell alcohol, or unless you sell pornographic magazines or pornographic newspapers. So you find a lot of Muslims who start to mix their own businesses and trade and work with a lot of these things. People struggle to pray at work, or especially the Friday prayers. They'll find themselves in sort of a combative situation with their own boss or their own workplace if they try to push for these rights. You have as well, when it comes to government, local politics and the police, Muslims are charged with crimes that non-Muslims will never be charged with. Journalists come to me all the time and ask me about, what do you think of this video and that video? And I said, well look, I haven't watched the video because I will get arrested for watching the video or having it on my phone, even though you would never will do. So the journalists, non-Muslims, they can download a magazine or a book or a video without any fear of being arrested. But a Muslim can be arrested simply for visiting a web page, even if they never read a document on it. The fact that they visited it, whether a curious teenager or just somebody trying to follow up the news, they can be arrested and imprisoned for it. And there are many cases, the majority of terror cases are related to downloading a document or something like that. There's a whole array of terror legislation which is only targeted against Muslims. There is a culture in the media and the press of demonizing and criminalizing Islam in a way that would never be accepted for any other community. So these are the things that every Muslim will see on a day-to-day basis, just in their day-to-day life.
Okay. I'm sort of moving on slightly into sort of just thinking about what the Muslim community has to do. I mean, of course, we've heard the Muslim, the British government, of course, or the European government, as well as the security services saying the Muslim community must do more to integrate or even assimilate. What do you think actually mean by this?
So, as I said before, Islam is a complete way of life. So we don't want to take any solutions to our problems or to society from David Cameron or from the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats or Labour or anybody else. We take it from Islam. So Islam tells us what your role is if you're living among non-Muslims in the Western land or in a non-Muslim land. What should be your role? It's not to integrate with them and to become more like them. Rather the Prophet warned us from doing that, warned us not to do that. And nor is it to be isolated and keep yourself to yourself and ignore what's going on. Rather, Muslims need to interact. We need to engage in da'wah, into calling people to Islam, to commanding good from the evil, correcting and bettering society, and teaching the people how their society should be governed, rather than tolerating the problems that we're facing under man-made laws.
Okay. Sort of just a final question on this section before we go into the final section is the issue of education. What type of education should Muslim children have, in your opinion?
So the education system in Islam, starts with the most important thing which everybody needs to know from Islam by necessity. So they will need to learn about the basic creed, about Iman, about Islam, about the 5 pillars of Islam, the basic pillars of faith, to believe in God, to believe in the books and the messengers and the angels, to believe in Islam and the ritual acts of Islam. And also, after following on to that, to understand about what Islam defines as our relationships with the people around us, our neighbours, our families, extended family, next of kin, as well as the relationship with the world, with animals, with the environment, and understanding the world around us, recognising God. And there's a need for education in various jobs and tasks as well that need to be skills that need to be learnt in every society, which is the duty of the Islamic State to enforce. For example, there always need to be engineers, there always need to be doctors, there always need to be teachers, and so this type of education is vital in order to govern the society according to Islam. The problem we have in the Western society, the Western education system, where it conflicts with Islam a lot, is, for example, when they encourage men and women or boys and girls to mix in a way that encourages promiscuity, encourages the idea of dating and sort of giving up the chastity. Rather, they should be taught to guard their chastity, look after their own honor, not to be taken advantage of or to take advantage of others. Girls in the UK and in Europe are under incredible pressure to give up their own honor and dignity to boys. There's that expectation upon them, and boys have that expectation, and they think that it's okay, it's normal, whereas they should be taught different values in relationships. The other problem you have is the education system has in Europe has a very Eurocentric view of the world. History for them is what happened in Europe. The whole world revolves around Europe. They will see, they will talk about the Romans, they'll talk about King Arthur and various folk tales, and then you have these big, long, dark ages where apparently nothing happened in the world. Then you have the First World War. But in those dark ages in Europe, there was actually a flourishing Islamic State that was leading the world in science, in medicine, in ruling such large parts of the world, and has such prosperity, that is on an unparalleled level. But we never taught about that. We never taught any of that heritage of Islam. And the point of history is to learn from the mistakes of the people in the past, and to follow in the footsteps of those who were righteous and correct. But that is not the approach of teaching history in the education system in the West.
In your opinion, how would you change this? How would you remedy the idea of history not being taught, or the history of the world not being taught in Europe?
So you need a complete change in the curriculum. The curriculum needs to be changed from top down. There needs to be clear objectives behind studying history. It's not being studied for the sake of it. There's clear objectives behind studying geography. Clear objectives behind studying science. Again, there is a strong atheist culture in the scientific community in Europe, which is wrong. Science, and the scientific method had roots in Islam. And in fact, there are many people who have always believed in God and believed in the creation of the heavens and the earth, which pioneered science throughout history. But that is lost in translation when it comes to what is taught in the schools about history, the history of science, and it's almost taught as if to believe in science you need to disbelieve in God, which is not true. So all of this attitude needs to change, and the objectives behind the teaching of these subjects needs to be understood properly according to Islam. And the curriculum, the syllabus, what is promoted to children needs to be shaken up and needs to be broadened to include a more realistic understanding of the world.
And as the final bit now of this interview, over the last sort of couple of years, especially since 2014, June, July 2014, we have a new state in the scene in the Middle East going by the name of Islamic State, or IS, or ISIL, depending on which synonym you want to use. What is your views on this?
I think there's a big change between this new state compared with the very violent regimes that are around it. The history of the surrounding regimes, a history of dictatorship, of Bashar al-Assad, of Saddam Hussein, of the Arab regimes, which is why there was the Arab Spring, because people rose up against those dictatorship, the tyranny, the torture in the prisons, the extreme violence, by those in authority, and there's a strong contrast between that and what's happening in Iraq now. That is the reason why the people are in support of that new government. Whereas then they were never really supportive of the ones before them, because they've actually brought some stability to their lives and actually put an end to this indiscriminate violence. There's no doubt that there is violence taking place and there's a war going on, but where previously the civilians, women and children, were targeted by the Iraqi regime or the Syrian regime, there's a far greater protection for those innocents now under the Islamic State.
Okay. And what would you say to people who accept the idea that there needs to be an Islamic State, but actually don't agree how the Islamic State came about?
From Muslims or non-Muslims?
For Muslim and non-Muslim.
Well, obviously people are different. I mean, for non-Muslims, I don't really see how they can really have that argument at all. States come about in different ways. They come about because of war. They come about because of coups. They come about because of various different ways. And Britain, sought out to change the regime in Iraq, through violence and war and bombing and killing, and they did it. And then it backfired on them, and their puppet regime was defeated, and a new regime came out, through war, through military means. So it's not the first time that has happened, and it's not really a reason to sort of treat it any different than you would another state. For some Muslims who have that view as well, they need to look at it more from a Sharia perspective, because we have in Islam the principle of Sultan al-Mutaghalib, where even if the ruler came to power in an incorrect way, by force, it is binding upon the people to unite behind them to avoid strife and rebellion or disunity or mass killing, which will arise from rebelling against a ruler.
And just to sort of clear this part of the interview, just to sort of thinking about Iran, Iraq, talking about Lebanon, Kuwait, talking about Yemen, Saudi Arabia. What do you think is sort of the Islamic State is doing to them? I mean, what sort of impact is it happening on those countries and their populations?
I mean, it's having a massive impact. For a start, there are many people that are leaving those countries to live in the Islamic State. There are a lot of people who are going there to fight. And a lot of people who are opposed to the existing governments where they are, in Iran or in Lebanon, and a lot of people who are really thinking to themselves, well, why can't we have the same here? And that's what is threatening those governments and causing them to sort of take this violent reaction to the Islamic State and to stop them, because people have always longed for Islam, for Sharia, and they've been looking for that for a long time. And they're always sort of pushed to compromise and have some form of compromise. But now they're actually seeing, well, actually it can be done, and we don't need to compromise. And that will change the relationship between the state and the people in all the surrounding countries.
And what do you think, just to come back to the idea of the Islamic State, what type of state do you think it's creating? Because we know that in the region, most of the countries are mono-ethnic, meaning there's only one type of person living there. So if we talk about Saudi Arabia, it's only Arab Saudis living there who have citizenship. So what do you think is different about the Islamic State?
One thing you notice about the Islamic State is that it is, is completely free of this racism. There's no concept of foreigner, or our people and their people outsiders, nothing like that. Rather, anybody who goes to the Islamic State from any background, any color, any language, any race, any nationality, they're welcome with open arms. And you see them side by side. You see them, playing together. The children playing together. They're eating together. They're working together. and there's really absolutely no significance given to their own ethnicity in the Islamic State, which is something very unique in the world today, whether in the east or the west.
Okay. And what do you think is sort of the feeling of the local population about the large amounts of people from other parts of the world coming in there, which they have never really had any contact with?
Well, the thing is that they share with them a culture, share with them religion by default. They will share with them beliefs and ideas and values, because the Islamic values are universal. It transcends cultures and of creed and race and languages, because it's all based on the Quran. The Quran is the same wherever you go. So that's why you find that they're welcome with open arms, and they see them as people coming to support them and help them live together as part of the same community, defending against a common enemy.
We know that that Islamic State is, according to the media, is well financed and so on. But how long do you think it can maintain its finance without actually trading with any other country or any other entity?
I think it can continue forever, to be honest with you, because the system that they're employing for the economy of the Islamic State is the Islamic model, which is an incredibly robust model. It doesn't rely upon banks and international monetary systems. It doesn't rely upon interest rates or inflation. There is none of that in the Islamic State. It relies upon the continuous circulation of the wealth, encouraging spending, encouraging working, without to have people hoarding their wealth or paying interest on the hoarding. There are no banks who are hoarding all of the wealth and recycling the wealth in this way and holding people hostage by refusing to lend. That can never happen in the Islamic State. So the problems that other countries are facing, and they're having to borrow from other countries in order to fund their own existing loans, that does not exist in the Islamic State, because that system is not present.
What about because we know that according to the media that the Islamic State used to sell oil, but from your opinion, I want to know, what else could the Islamic State trade and sell to sort of generate wealth?
You see, the Islamic State, it doesn't need to sell to people abroad in order to generate wealth, because the way that the economy works is by circulating the wealth. If everybody is spending from the community, that money will change hands and will come back to where it started in the first place, and will continue to circulate, because it's not being taken out of circulation by hoarding in the banks. And the money is real. We're not going to have they're introducing the golden standard. So there is real wealth involved. It's not just fake wealth, which can lose value arbitrarily or be printed more money be printed arbitrarily. There's real resources there, and those resources can be sold, and they can be traded with the people. They can be traded between the people, and they can be distributed as well. So because they do not have the same systems that the West have, in which they need to rely on others to do that, they will not have that problem in which they need to generate more wealth from abroad in order to fund what they're doing. Okay, plus as long as they are continuing their own campaigns, they continue to take more resources from the Iraqi regime, the Assad regime, and they will continue to benefit from that as well.
Okay, and just moving on to sort of this idea that a lot of Europeans and of course a lot of people from the rest of the Muslim world and non-Muslim world are actually going over there to fight. What's your opinion on this?
Well, the thing is, a lot of people are going there to live. They're going there because they want to live in the Islamic State under the Sharia. They are fed up of living under man-made laws where they cannot really practice their religion properly or freely, where they have constant fear and intimidation from the police and the authorities. So they go in there to have a better life. That's why they're taking their families with them, their children with them. And naturally, if they're under attack there from a coalition, they will defend their family, whether living in Islamic State or living anywhere else. They will take up arms and defend themselves. And they will continue to rise up against dictators like Bashar al-Assad. So, that is, I don't think that's going to change.
What is said to sort of people, even from the Muslim community, but also from the government security services, is that actually what these young people are doing is actually wrong, and they find it quite difficult to understand what is attracting them to the Islamic State. And in your sort of opinion, my question perhaps to you is, in your opinion, what do you think are the motivation factors? What are the sort of the push factors and the pull factors that are attracting these young men and women, and of course, as we learned today, the family as well, to move to the Islamic State?
Well, the motivations they include, first of all, many Muslims, when they become more politically aware, they become aware of what is happening in that region. They will see that there are various different factions, in that region. Among them is the Iraqi regime and the Shia militia and the death squads. You have Bashar al-Assad and his Shabiha thugs. You have the Kurdish PKK, which is a terrorist organization, and they will see what crimes they are committing. And in between you have the Islamic State, which is fighting against all of them. And the call and the cause of the Assad regime is entirely selfish, about propping up a dictator and abusing the rights of the people for their own benefit. The cause of the Iraqi regime is the same, is to protect the American interests. The cause of the Kurdish forces and the PKK is the same. They are communists. They are atheist communists, and the atrocities they're committing, they are unspeakable. Some of them. So they will think about this situation that, well, none of these causes are worth fighting for. Rather, they should be fought against. And they will look to the Islamic State, what they're calling for, and they will see the cause of establishing an Islamic law, Islamic Sharia law on the earth, to establish that justice and that due process and the system of accountability for those authorities, which doesn't exist in those other factions. They will see that as a noble cause. They will see it as something which is a good thing, and that's what will attract them, to say that, well, yes, we should have some unity. And they will look to their life where they are and the discrimination and the hardships that they have to face compared with what is offered in Islamic State. They're offering free medication, free housing, free even free transport and free fuel, even to people who arrive there new as immigrants. So that is something which is unheard of anywhere else. So these things will naturally attract somebody to want to go and live there.
Okay, what kind of jobs do you think, in your opinion, from the media and maybe even your own research, what kind of jobs are these people that are going over from Europe and other parts of the world doing in Islamic State?
There are many jobs. They need teachers, they need hospital workers, doctors, assistants, nurses. They need, so they're employing people who go over there. They have people in authority, clerks in the courts. They need people who are going to be manning the streets and guarding the streets, security. They will need people who are cleaning the streets. People who to help set up businesses, engineers. When they had the Mosul Dam was damaged, the Islamic State sent a team of engineers to fix it. So these type of jobs, and obviously they made a call back in June that they need those professionals with these type of skills in order to help rebuild the society that has been ravaged by war. So there are many people from all different walks of life finding a new life and a role to play in the Islamic State.
Okay. And this idea of women traveling from Europe has sort of caused sense of moral outrage and led to some sort of media outlets calling them jihadi brides or groomed or somehow coerced in some way. What's your opinion about this?
And the problem is with the media is that they have an imagination but they have no facts. The reality is they don't have any reporters or journalists in Islamic State at all. They have no idea what's going on there. They are fueling or they are basing their reports purely on their own imagination, their own prejudices, their own preconceived ideas and judgments that they've had, to fit in line with the propaganda of their government, which is trying to declare war and to dehumanize and demonize those in the Islamic State. There's no evidence at all for what they're talking about. They're talking about 3 girls that left the UK, and they're calling them jihadi brides. One journalist asked me that. I said, well, where did you get this idea from, the jihadi brides? Where did that come from? And they have no answer for that, because they made it up. So women are going there with their children, husbands and wives, fathers and children, mothers. They are going over there because they want to settle in a new life, in a new place, which is a better culture and the way of life, a safer environment for them, for their children, better schooling, better education system. That is what they're looking for, and they're going there to, in order to find it.
And what do you think about the sort of the government sort of setting up strategies, think tanks, an organisation to somehow prevent young people, especially women, from being radicalised and then going to the Islamic State?
I think the entire thing is a bit of a joke, and it's really an attempt to spy on the Muslims only and to criminalise them. They want to say that you have a freedom to believe whatever you like in the UK, but at the same time they want to say you can't believe what you like. If you believe the wrong thing, we're going to get you, we're going to stop you. And they want to dictate to Muslim children, Muslim women in particular, what they should believe. And they want to speak about Muslim women as if they don't have an opinion. They're not allowed to have an opinion or a voice. And if they ever have an opinion, they must have been brainwashed, or they must have been hypnotized, or must have been seduced. And that is a very shallow and patronizing view of the Muslim community in general, and Muslim women in particular. Rather, I believe that the Muslim women, especially the practicing Muslim woman, is an example of assertiveness and independent thinking and strong will for all women around the world. To live as a Muslim woman, especially one who wears a hijab or the burqa in European countries, is incredibly hard, and it takes an incredibly strong will and independent thinking, to have and high self-esteem, to not care about what the people think of you and what they're going to say to you, in order to continue firm in that way. It takes an incredibly assertive woman to do that. So it's about time they realize that no, women, they do have their own opinion, they have their own views, and just because they have a view that's different from yours doesn't mean that they are wrong or they've been brainwashed. Maybe their view is actually better than yours.
And just one final question to end up the interview. This is we saw today, yesterday actually in the media, that a family from Rochdale or a group of people were related who are actually trying to get into Syria. We don't know whether they were going to join the Islamic State or not. But what's your view on this of families actually travelling to join the Islamic State? And do you think this is a good thing? And do you think this is perhaps a final phase of what some people would call ISIS recruitment?
I don't see a problem with families leaving the UK and going anywhere in the world. Why should that be a problem? And this is the crux of the matter here in the UK, is that there is one law for Muslims and another law for anybody else. If they were non-Muslim looking to move to another country, or even to go to Turkey, they would never be stopped or harmed or arrested or have any kind of problem at all at the airport. Because it seemed perfectly natural for people to go and settle in Australia, or Britons to go and live in Spain, or to settle in Bulgaria. There are plenty of families leaving the UK to live somewhere else because they think they can have actually a better life there. And the same is true for Muslims. For years, Muslims have been saying that they want to leave this country and want to go somewhere else. And it's the British press and the far-right groups and even politicians that have always been telling the Muslims, if you don't like it here, why don't you go somewhere else? Encouraging them to leave and go live somewhere else if they don't like the values here. Well, that's exactly what's happened. And if they cannot live their life here, then indeed it's a good thing for them to go and live somewhere where they can practice Islam properly.
And do you think that this final question is, do you think that the ideas that these people have acquired, the families have acquired, are somehow very different to the ideas acquired by the young men who went to Syria in 2013 and 2014?
No, at the end of the day, there are different objectives behind people going. Some people are going specifically because they want to defend the innocent men, women and children being killed by Bashar al-Assad. Others are going for their own reasons, for their own needs. They want to have a better life for their children, better future for their children, and so they're going for that reason. But essentially, they all want an end to the tyranny of those dictatorial regimes, and they want to have a state or a place where they can live according to Islam, governed by the Sharia.
Okay, thank you very much, Abu Bara, for this interview.